Don't you wish all jobs came with a training manual, especially parenting? I have four kids at home and going through their development. I just wish I had a chart or a roadmap of exactly where they needed to be and when. It can be so hard through that journey of development to know, are they on track? Are they off track? What should come first? What should come next? Is this common? Is this normal? Are they behind? Gosh, it just gets crazy when we think about our own kids and we think about others. And that's why I want to talk to you about in this video, because we get to see so many kiddos in practice that struggle with developmental delays throughout their developmental milestone. But here's what I want to talk about is sometimes that's normal, sometimes it's common, and sometimes we can help that. But as parents, it's hard to know what's common and normal. Are they on track or are they behind? So we want to talk about that first, about what is normal development, and then help you really to trust that mom or dad gut as a parent. If you're feeling like your son or daughter is maybe a little bit behind as a baby, as a 2-year old, as a 4-year old, or now 5-year old, how do we look through that, through development, and say, how can we really help that? How can we help it in the right ways, in the right sequence, and in the right order? That's going to give you the best results. So, the one thing that I've always remembered when I talk to new parents is just like myself is we don't necessarily know when things are supposed to happen or how they're supposed to happen, but we have a really good idea in our gut, in that like intuitive sense that says, okay, this is what should be happening or what shouldn't. And this was so the case with a little girl named Harper that we took care of. She had a difficult birth. She was born with a lot of tension in her upper neck and her shoulders. She struggled breastfeeding, looking left to right to effectively feed on both sides, to open and close her mouth. And she struggled throughout her first year of life with digestive issues to the point where she would cry constantly and couldn't self soothe. When she showed up to our office at 18 months, she wasn't walking, let alone talking at that point. There was a big delay, and it's because through that first year of life, that was not connecting the way that it could and should be. And later on in this conversation, I'm going to share with you where she's at now. But that's exactly what this entire conversation is going to be all about today, is to look at these phases of development. And when it comes to kids, are they highly complex? Absolutely. But the way I like to break it down is to really simplify things in the form of really two phases of development. So I want to share my screen and go through this with you because this is so important when we look at this. When we look at a baby's development, there's really these two phases to it. Phase one being that eat, sleep, poop phase and move. And then that sets up shop for phase two. So this is phase one here. This then sets up for phase two. When babies are first born, they're designed to do those three primitive things, right? That's what then allows for the system to grow and develop the way that it could and should be. So it's not necessarily looking at exactly when your child is moving through development, but more importantly, it's looking at the sequence, the order. Are we achieving development with ease? Because that's what sets up for that next stage of higher executive function. These multi-complex systems, they stack upon and they build upon the previous milestones. So going through that very first 3 to 4 months of development, when babies are designed to eat, sleep, and poop, if we're having issues with one or all three of those systems, that's a possible red flag that development down the line may be affected. And most often parents, they'll get to phase two, and that's when they see these bigger challenges show up with speech, with language, with communication. But most often there was a challenge that first started through that first year of life in the form of a breastfeeding challenge, an eating challenge, a digestive challenge, a child that couldn't soothe properly or couldn't sleep, couldn't poop, couldn't move properly, couldn't turn their head and look left to right, couldn't roll over, couldn't get up on their hands and knees, couldn't sit up properly, or they might have skipped a step entirely. That sequence is the most important piece to the puzzle, looking at your child's development. So, how does the system become disconnected? Well, it becomes disconnected, and what we see most often in our office is right here, birth. Birth being the biggest physical stress that we have to endure, especially at the very early phase of development. And whether it was, a birth where there was a lot of intervention, whether it was in utero constraint or tightness within the pregnancy periods of baby, whatever that looks like, what that has a tendency to do is to affect the head, the upper neck, and because of its location to the very delicate circuitry or wires or functions within the system, so specifically the upper neck, when we have irritation, or what we call chiropractically, we call it a subluxation. So when the system is irritated or inflamed or subluxated, specifically through the head and the upper neck, a baby's brain is going to know that, and it's going to go into this muscle tightness or tension. So that's what's happening with little Harper when she first came to our office. We went through her story, went through her history, and she had a challenge early on of looking and feeding on both sides equally and effectively because there was more tone and tension on one side, which was causing her head to turn or tilt in the form of what's called torticollis. So now we have this increased tone and tension here. The brain is trying to protect this delicate wiring. It's going to affect how we eat, how we bring food in. It's going to also affect and influence what's called the vagus nerve. So the neurology that leaves the head and the brain, it exits and passes in front of the top two neural vertebrae in the neck, and it goes into our internal organs to relax the system, to put it in a state where it can accept food in, keep it in, and move it out through the bottom. So if the system is irritated, the entire system now, really system wide, becomes tightened up. So if we do get food in, it's going to shoot back up. Or if we do get food in, it's going to stay in there and it's going to get stuck and stagnant. And it's going to start to create a lot of gassiness or discomfort, rather than having the system efficiently move it through in a nice, efficient manner. That's the first phase, that eat, sleep, poop, and beginning to move, holding our head up, looking left to right, rolling over, starting to push up, to sit up, to crawl, then walk. That's what sets up for that second phase of development, which is the speech and communication, which is the sensory, the social and playing, and also learning. So the upper neck not only is going to influence that digestion portion, but it's going to influence the motor portion. The upper neck not only controls how we turn our head and look left to right, but it also controls coordination and balance. It controls and is going to influence what's called the cerebellum, the base of the brain. That is the motor movement of the entire nervous system as a whole. So that area becomes affected, and it not just affects one thing, it will start to affect multiple things. So as that second phase of development comes online, it's based upon the previous milestones or how efficient we were at that point. Okay, so if you are someone that has been struggling with a child that just hasn't been moving through the phases of development, in your mom gut, that something is off, please do not hesitate to reach out. We're going to walk you through what is normal, what is not normal. We're going to go through their and your child's case history to bring some clarity as to potentially where this first disconnect or disruption first started, whether or not they had an issue with the breastfeeding journey or a bottle feeding journey, whether they had an issue with sleeping, with pooping, digestion. These are all signs that as we get to phase two, age 2, 3, 4, 5, where now we're having a bigger developmental challenge, we have to go back to gain some clarity to see exactly how the nervous system was growing and developing. And if there is something in their story, in their history, finding a pediatric, neurologically focused chiropractor is going to be the best bet to get things reconnected, to get things restored so that normal developmental progression can take place, just like it did with Harper. Within a few short months of care, she was back. She had met all of her milestones from not being able to walk at 18 months to walking and then shortly after that talking. So the nervous system, it can pick up, it can learn so incredibly fast when we have a calm and connected system. But the nervous system, it cannot be in growth and survival or fight or flight mode at the same time. That's not how the nervous system works. A nervous system gets stuck in this protection state when we have a lot of stress on the system, and that most notable one being the birth process. The birth process, like I stated earlier, is so physically stressful on your baby's head and their upper neck. And you know intuitively when you first held your beautiful baby, what's that one area that you made sure was protected, that you made sure was stabilized? It's the head, the upper neck. And that's because you knew that area was the most unstable, and also that that area is the most important to their development. But often through that labor and delivery, that area of the head, the upper neck, it can become irritated and inflamed and show up on the outside as a child that has issues eating, sleeping, pooping, soothing, or moving through those normal stages of development. So if you got value out of this conversation today, please share this with your friends. Please like it, comment, reach out